Welcome back to Square Table Gaming, where we're going to celebrate spooky season with 5 episodes of Elden Lore based solely on aspects of Elden Ring that we find scary, disturbing, or flat out disgusting. For today's topic, we're going to explore an area of the lands between that many have found deeply unnerving when first finding it in the Altus Plateau. It's a village of mirth and celebration, where the residents will ignore you as you enter their space. The deeper we dove into this village, the more we came to understand that our instincts were spot on. We should feel unnerved, because Dominula, the Windmill Village, is where many gods likely met their end, long before we came to the lands between.
When we first come to the village, we are met with older women dancing around their wooden posts. These women are known as Celebrants and are likely the namesake of the village, as Dominula means, Little Mistress. They can be heard laughing and enjoying the eternal festival that seems to be in full swing.
While their visage and glee is enough to put us on edge, the descriptions from their garments add to the unease you feel around them. Ceremonial garb worn by dancers at the festivities in Dominula, the village of windmills, faintly bloodstained. There's even another version of their clothes we can find that has blue embellishments. It tells us, use of this garb dyed in a stunning blue is only permitted for young maids who play the central role in the festival. So those wearing blue have a special place in the festivities, and through a conversation with a spirit in the village, we get an idea as to what that may be. Upon speaking with this spirit, he says, "I hear a festive melody. No, don't skin me. My hide is filthy, I swear." This line alone sheds light on the festival. This merriment and dancing is a precursor to one thing: skinning the village's victims alive. By looking at each variant of the celebrant enemy, we can learn more about their customs. The celebrant harvesters are the women dressed in blue. They carry 2 sickles, and now, knowing that they have a special place in the festival, we believe this means they are the ones who actually do the skinning. The descriptions on all of the celebrant weapons tell us that they are decorated with flowers and many colored fabrics, ceremonial tool used by dancers during the festivities of Dominula, crafted from human bone. The sickles are used to skin the village's victims, and presumably, the bones of those victims are used to make more sickles. Apparently, they use every part of the corpse. The other celebrants seem to each have their own role in the festival. The celebrant gardeners wield the Rib-Rake, which may have been used to drag their prey to the spot where they would be skinned. Celebrant butcher wields a large cleaver, which would have been helpful in taking apart large chunks of their victim to make the skinning easier. Lastly, we have the celebrant thresher and grenader, both of which wield a unique weapon, the Celebrant Skull. Contrary to what the name suggests, this is not the skull of a celebrant. The description tells us this is a large bludgeon decorated with flowers and many colored fabrics, ceremonial tool used by dancers during the festivities of Dominula, Windmill Village. The striking end is a skull too large in size to be human.
So this weapon was perhaps used to kill their victims after the skinning and cleaving were over.
But if the head is too large to be human, where did it come from? If we travel to the top of the hill, all the way through the village, a boss appears next to the windmill, a Godskin apostle. All of the pieces fall into place upon seeing this enemy. Dominula, the Windmill Village, is the site where gods were butchered and skinned in order to provide the Godskin apostles with their garb. These celebrants likely served the Godskin apostles long ago, skinning the many lesser gods across the lands between, and creating the Godskin apostle and noble clothing. In fact, we believe the Godskin apostle we fight at the top of the village may have even instructed them on how to properly skin the gods. We think this due to the weapon he drops after being defeated, the Godskin Peeler. Its description calls it a unique twin blade wielded by Godskin apostles, characterized by its disturbing design. One end features a sickle for slicing attacks, while the other boasts a winding spike for boring into flesh. Given its title as a peeler, we think this apostle taught the Celebrants how to skin the gods with their sickles, and started the never-ending festival that now rules the village. As we've discussed before, the gods that once roamed the lands between have dwindled significantly to only those with close ties to the Golden Order. In our video about the Mausoleum Knights, we dove into how we think it's possible Marika had many children we know nothing about and are currently long dead, and the Godskin apostles themselves support this idea. Otherwise, whose Godskin are they wearing? Assuming this is true, there are no more gods for the Celebrants to skin, but still they continue their festival, ready to draw in any who cross their village and hear the levity, the sounds of those celebrating. Perhaps the skulls wielded by the Celebrants that are too large to be human in nature once belonged to these lesser gods. Once their bodies were raked, their limbs cleaved, and their skin flayed, their heads were used as weapons to bludgeon those who resisted the process. This would also explain why all of the Celebrant weapons have the ability to draw runes from others upon each hit. If these weapons were made from gods, perhaps some trace of their power remains, and they seek runes to increase their wielder's strength.
To the west of the village entrance, we can find multiple grain silos, one infested with large rats, one guarded by demi-humans, and one with celebrants dancing around the corpses of nobles. The Inhuman one has an interesting theory on the purpose of this area, which basically boils down to the rats contaminating the village's food supply and causing their madness. However, we have another idea what these silos are used for. We know that the women of Dominula skinned the gods and men that entered their village as part of their festivities. Their bones were used for weaponry, and their skin for godskin garb. But what did they do with the leftover remains? They can't be seen in the village, as any corpses we find are unskinned. But what if they had a storage place for the leftover viscera of their festival? What if they disposed of their victims' remains within the windmills? This would explain why giant rats congregate outside. They're hungry. This theory is bolstered by the pile of corpses being burned at one of the silos. Perhaps we're interrupting the final phase of their ritual. Burn the flesh and dispose of the bodies.
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention the visual similarities between the Celebrants, their rituals, and the movie Midsommar. While we could have sworn that we saw an interview at some point where Hidetaka Miyazaki sang the movie's praises, we could not find it again while doing research for this video. While it's possible he drew inspiration from this movie with their cult-like clothing and customs, it's just as likely these aesthetics came from the broader concepts of Swedish Midsommar traditions. It's also possible this aesthetic could be a callback to the Wicker Man. Thematically, this would make more sense, as in that movie we see a man being sacrificed to the gods, while in Dominula, the gods themselves are sacrificed for the betterment of their community. The horrors of Dominula the Windmill Village feel out of place in Elden Ring. Of course, it makes sense that the Godskin apostles would have had to have the gods skinned somewhere in order to make their robes, but the concept that this was done in a happy village, celebrating an eternal festival, with dancing and music feels somehow out of place. The levity of a celebration is not found anywhere else throughout Elden Ring, and we think that the most unnerving thing about this village is that it breaks with the atmosphere of the lands between. This land is in a state of decay. We are seeing the Erd Tree long past its prime, and many of the gods we do battle with are merely shadows of their former selves. Radon is a mindless monster, not a brilliant general. Godric is a crazed madman stealing the limbs off Tarnished, convinced they will make him stronger. Renala is obsessed with her cycle of rebirth, and cares not for anything outside of her library in Raya Lucaria Academy. There is no revelry in this land. There is no dancing and songs. And the inclusion of these things in Dominula unnerves you before you even know the history of the village. brilliant way of injecting some terror into the lands between. Thank you for joining us on our first dive into the scarier enemies and locations throughout the lands between. We really love taking a closer look at Dominula, and we hope you enjoyed getting the story behind this spooky town. Next week, we'll be discussing the Finger Creepers, an enemy likely to grab your attention and hold on tight. If you have any thoughts or theories on the Windmill Village or its celebrants, let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss out on our next video. We'll see you next time for more Elden Lore.